often hear about the importance of knowing your why as professionals, especially in figuring out how to achieve goals that excite us and create the lives and careers we enjoy. How do we do that as educators? And how do we dig deep to identify what is our why and how we can communicate that in a meaningful and succinct way to convey our value and our impact? Hello, my name is Hannah Knecht.
And I am Nate Key, and the two of us have been speaking with each other and sharing ideas for the past 3 years or so. It's been an incredible experience where both of us have learned a lot about our roles as educators and about training and development and teaching. And it's inspired us to look for new ways to be in the world and to show up as educators. We've learned a lot about ourselves. We've learned a lot about each other. And we wanted to open this up to a dialogue with you as well. As a listener, you're going to have an opportunity to comment or to maybe even come on the show and tell us about what you do. And we wanted to create that space for educators to learn from each other and become inspired to become the best we can possibly be.
So the two of us have very different entry points to this world of education. Some of us pursue it right from the start in undergrad and graduate school, like I did, and others of us fall into it accidentally, whether that's in a corporate setting through learning and development, training, or something else. And in this first episode, Nate and I want to explore these questions and lean into this theme of why are we educators? We'll share a little bit about who we are, where we've come from, and why we're doing this.
And as we do, we want to encourage you to consider how we can creatively communicate that why to other people in a few short sentences or in a casual manner. So whether you're a classroom teacher in a public school or you're a corporate learning and development professional, I'm really excited about being able to have this conversation with you today. Hannah, why don't we start with you? So can you tell us about how you got into training or teaching and education?
I first realized this when I was about 6 years old. I'd come home from first grade each day. I was eager to actually teach back what I was learning to my younger brother, who's about 2.5 years younger than me. And I'd tape up my worksheets from the day on the walls of my closet classroom and to just do a classroom play school with him. And he was so eager to soak it up. And he's now a successful attorney, but he was eager to learn at a young age. And I just loved being able to impart some of my knowledge about that. I remember teaching him how to subtract and regroup large numbers. And even to this day, he'll give me credit for that. My parents chose to homeschool us the following year, second grade onward. And I'm a homeschool graduate from high school, but that gave me a really unique lens to look at education from a non-conventional perspective. Our family went to homeschool curriculum fairs, and I would see all the different curriculums that were out there and ways to engage learners that were sometimes out of the box from your typical classroom setting. And so that really expanded my thoughts about education and what I've brought to my own experience.
So did you actually decide at 6 years old that you were going to be an educator?
I floundered a little bit, and I
Okay.
think that could be relatable to a lot of our listeners. In college, I changed my major about 8 times, really searching for my why. It wasn't until I went on a summer immersive missions trip where I was in Guatemala for several months teaching English at an orphanage. And I was able to share and see those kids' faces light up the same way that my brother's face lit up when I was so young. And that just brought an intrinsic motivation to me and helped me solidify. When I go back to college, I am going to be an elementary education major and pursue this as my career. So that was my experience that really helped me go, this is who you are. This is what you should be walking forward in. I'm glad you asked that question.
Not everybody sticks with it, though. There's a lot of teachers and a lot of educators and a lot of training development folks that they do it for a little while and then they decide, you know what? The reality of the job is not what I thought it was going to be. I'm out. But you didn't. You stuck with it. So tell us a little bit about that. Why is this something you kept on doing?
Honestly, it's the joy. I found
Mm.
joy in empowering others and seeing them thrive and knowing that I had a part in their development. That's what has kept me going. And there's been different ways I've done that. My background is in public education. I started out as a fourth grade teacher for 7 years in the classroom. And then I transitioned to teaching sixth grade history for 3 years and loved that. That's how I met my husband. He was a fifth grade teacher on the same hallway as me. And education's also been in my family. My grandmother was a kindergarten teacher for 30 years, and she wrote a book in the 80s called Slow and Steady, Get Me Ready. And I took that after she passed and wanted to offer it for our next generation. So I created the second edition called Slow and Steady, Get Me Ready for Kindergarten in 2017 when I was getting my master's degree. And really, that was another piece of my story in just keeping me involved in how could I see myself as an educator and bring that to not just the classroom or preschool teachers, but also parents and grandparents, and how they could use just everyday experiences with their children to help in that development and get them ready for school. And then my husband and I, we started sailing and we pursued the dream of living on board our sailboat. And at that time, I transitioned out of public education and became the program director for an educational nonprofit called Hands Across the Sea. And we developed and sustained school libraries in 6 English-speaking Caribbean countries. And I had the opportunity to work with a lot of retired public school teachers from the Caribbean. We put on some fabulous teacher workshops in person and remotely for teachers and getting them excited of how to bring in books in their classroom to encourage literacy. And I love that. Again, imparting that and seeing how the joy that I was able to bring in empowering these other teachers to bring that literacy to the classroom. And then
And
COVID.
then we met.
That's right. When COVID hit, my nonprofit took a pretty hard hit. And that was my cue to pivot. And I
Mhm.
started thinking, okay, how could I use my skills in education and adapt them in a different way? And corporate training was my next step in my career. And that's how we met at Lincoln Financial Group,
Right.
using those skills in a different way and finding opportunities to connect with adult learners by bringing in a lot of the same techniques that I had used with my students in elementary and in middle school, because I think deep down inside, we're all just really big kids. And we need those fun things to keep us motivated and learning. And then from there, I moved into our HR department and had the opportunity to lead a leadership development program. And I just loved that because not only was I offering opportunities and resources and support for future leaders at Lincoln to really tap into those skills, but I could run side by side and coaching and mentoring and really encouraging. That encouragement piece came out and just cheering those students on to identify their potential and step into their best. That's kind of me in a nutshell of my career journey so far. I'm excited for what opportunities are next. I love instructional design. My creativity comes out there, and consulting, using my talent to really make learning accessible.
How did it, how did your why change over this time? You've been in public school, nonprofit, the corporate world. How did that change from where you got into it initially, where it's just something you were as a 6 year old just excited about showing your little brother how much you know about stuff, or maybe it was just a thrill of seeing him light up to where you are today? Did anything change in you?
I've changed a lot for sure. Each of these experiences has grown me as an educator in new ways and
Yeah.
helped me expand the way that I see myself as an educator, because I'm not just a classroom teacher. I now
Yeah.
see that there's so many branches of education, with the corporate training piece, with the instructional design piece, with even program managing and what that looks like to tap into that. So I think for me, it's helped me not stay so limited in how
Mm.
I could bring that. And it's helped me widen my impact as well. But no matter where I go or what I do, I really consider myself a problem solver and a joy bringer. And I think that has been something that started at a young age, just helping people reimagine where learning and now technology and people connect. So that's where
Yeah.
I thrive and hope others will too. I'm often thought of as Mary Poppins, bringing that sense of levity, that joy to my team that makes doing hard work just a little fun.
I love that you brought up Mary Poppins. Quick story. My wife and my son were recently watching Mary Poppins, and I was really impressed by Mary Poppins. She has a levity, she has a joy, but she also has this incredible confidence about herself. She literally blows away the competition during the interview process. Like she like swoops in and all the other nannies just whoo, they like literally blow away. It's just really interesting to watch that. So I love that picture because she's fun, but she also is very serious at moments. So she's also confident in herself and she brings really a sense of stability to these kids that otherwise didn't have it. And I think that's really a cool picture.
I'm glad you brought that up because I think that confidence that we do bring, it helps build trust with those that we're teaching, with those
Yeah.
that we are working with. And so I appreciate that you noticed that about her confidence and just that trustworthiness in the situation.
How about the impact of what you do? Like, if you think about the different roles that you've had, just the overall impact that you feel you've either had on the industry, on yourself, on your learners. Tell us a little bit about that.
It boils down to people
Mm.
because so much of what we do is about people. How can we connect people with that next piece of what they need to learn? And so I have noticed that the impact of what I do really is about relationships. And how I've been able to show my impact is through being that trusted advisor. When I'm able to build that trust and connection with someone who then in turn comes back and sees me as someone who is going to advise and connect them with that resource or that information that's just going to push them forward. And what kind of emotional safety or psychological safety are we as educators bringing to that classroom setting, whether it's in person or online? How are we creating a safe environment for our students, for the participants in our programs to take risks? And let's be honest, asking a question is taking a risk.
Yeah.
There's so much fear that can be involved in asking questions, but questions are what lead to stories. And
Mm.
stories are what lead to connection. And connections lead to trust, which I believe then leads to that loyalty. And that's what I've really built my classroom management around when I was in the classroom with students. And I've noticed how that has carried on when I've been working with adult students as well.
And I think that's part of what we're trying to do here. Even in this first episode, to find out about who you are and who I am, because that's the story and the connection that sort of helps bridge that gap. So I know, what I'm getting into, right? And why should I tune in next time?
Yes, exactly. What am I going to get out of this for me? And is this worth the time that I'm putting into it? Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That's really good. That's really
It
good.
is.
I feel like the people that we're able to impact is really important. And I think that's probably a unifying thing with most educators, whether in the public schools or you're a corporate trainer, is that this desire to help.
Absolutely. And we'll probably talk about this in future episodes. There's definitely ways to go ahead and measure that impact as
Yeah.
educators that we can talk more about in our particular settings and roles. But I think overall, when I'm just looking at my career as a whole, it boils down to people, relationships, and that trust that's built. So let's go ahead and turn it back a little bit on you. You have a different
Sure.
story of how you got into education. It wasn't necessarily something you pursued right out of the gate or knew about yourself. So
That's right.
I'd love to hear a little bit about your background and how you got into education.
I saw this podcast one time. It was called The Accidental Trainer. And I thought that's probably most of us in the corporate learning and development world. Like no one just decides in middle school, my goodness, I can't wait to teach people how to sell insurance. This is going to be awesome. I never really would have thought of myself as that. I fell into it accidentally, and it really came with two different instances that were right within about a year of each other. So the first was in my personal life. I was attending a church, and there was a young adult group there, and there was a leader that who was doing the teaching and all that sort of stuff. And one day he just announced suddenly that he was leaving. No notice. It's like, next week I'm gone. And he looks at me and he's like, hey, and you're gonna teach next week. I'm turning the reins over to you.
What a surprise.
Okay, I guess I'm doing next week. And I just fell into it. And then simultaneously, it wasn't like the same week, but it was within the same period of time. I was working at Universal Studios Florida at the Jaws ride. I was at the Jaws ride. It was great. And there was a woman that had been working with our team at the Jaws ride. She was in the corporate learning and development world. She did a lot of coaching, and she actually invited me to interview for a brand new position that was part of the team. And it was going to be one part, it was going to be facilitating new hire orientations. But there was another part of it that was actually doing coaching. It was all different areas in the park. It was merchandise and food service and operations and the marketing team, and working with these different teams and seeing some gaps that they had and then helping them fill them in with some good skills training. And so I just accidentally got into it. People just saw something in me and said, hey, you can do this. And I went for it.
I love that. I'm noticing a theme there. It was them seeing something in you that you didn't
Mhm.
necessarily see in yourself, that you
Yeah.
were good at, and that ultimately you enjoyed.
Yeah.
And that's huge. I think that a lot of us sometimes need that confirmation. We
Yeah.
need that validation to actually see, okay, that could be our next step when sometimes we don't see it ourselves.
Absolutely. I think
Yeah.
initially I was just thrilled to be asked to do something
Yeah.
that I thought was an honor, right? Oh, we get to train people, or you get to be the one that brings something to the table. That seemed like an honor. But at the same time, you start doing it for a little while and you're like, oh, wow, like they did see something in me and I actually am pretty good at this. It wasn't just a one off where I was just charismatic or whatever.
What would you say that is your initial why, or was there more to that?
Yeah,
Of
I
like,
think initially it was just somebody asked me to do it. And I said yes because I thought it would be nice to do what people ask me to. There's a lot to that, by the way. A lot of therapy behind just doing things because people ask you to do them. But
yeah.
in this case, it did seem like an honor. And it was something that I thought, oh, that's a cool thing that you're trusting me to be an educator for other people and entrusting me with that responsibility. And so it felt really good to be sought out.
Mhm. Yes,
And
you're
then,
sought out. I think that's
yeah,
huge. Yeah, for
yeah.
sure. So you're working at Universal and getting your feet wet with training. Why did you stick with it? Talk a little bit about your career journey and what kept you in training,
Yeah.
coaching, and development.
It turns out I am pretty good at it.
I would say so too. I've been in some of your trainings for sure.
And that took a lot of work, by the way. I had a lot of great mentors that helped me learn how to be an educator, helped me learn what it means to not just talk at people for an hour and a half, but to actually engage and to see the room and to ask the right questions. So it's an interactive experience. Through that process, just learning that and then finding out that I'm good at it and then finding out that I enjoy it. What a magic thing to find out that something that you're good at is also something that you enjoy.
Yes.
And that is so rare. There are lots of things that I really enjoy that I am not good at
Hmm.
or that I want to be better at. And there's a lot of things that I'm really good at that I don't really want to do. Like they're just regardless of how good I am at food preparation, and I'm okay. I'm a decent cook at home, but I don't want to do that for a living. And there's other people that just it lights them up and they love it. I think most of us have an intuitive understanding that we are good at something once we do it. And
Hmm.
so I'll just lean on that and say I stuck with it because it is something that kind of lit me up and really kept me going. I was able to transition from the Universal Studios experience out to Seattle as a writer, and it was still in the education world that I was writing short films that were training films, but the company had this idea that we were going to make ones that people actually wanted to watch as opposed to ones that people had to watch. Unfortunately, during 2007, the economy collapsed and they couldn't afford to keep me on. And similar to your story with the nonprofit, I had to find something that was a little more stable. And I never thought of the insurance industry as a place that I'd end up. And yet I joined the insurance industry as a sales trainer and it clicked. And it was amazing. It was something that I was not just good at, but I'm really good at this thing. And to be able to see hundreds and hundreds of people and watch their success and their achievements, like selfishly, that is really rewarding.
Yeah, your passion is shining through even as you're sharing,
Yeah.
for sure.
There's a lot of people that say, wouldn't it be more lucrative as a career to do something like this yourself, to go into sales? I say, yeah, it may be more lucrative, but the reward of seeing not just the achievement of one person, but the achievement of hundreds, oh my goodness, unless you've been there, it doesn't really click. And that's what I think we all want to see is we want to see that empowerment of the people that we work with in the classroom and see them grow and learn, see them excel and achieve and become really amazing at what they have in life. And that keeps me there. And that's also the impact, right? That's
Hmm.
the shared experience. That's going back to people and the trust and the connection. Like, that's really what it comes down to. I think you said it so well. Being able to see the people, learn to trust you as a facilitator, and then trust themselves to go do something, and then be able to be connected to those successes later on. And even though I didn't necessarily sell $1 million worth of life insurance, I get to feel like I was a part of it because of the fact that somebody was in my classroom at some point. And so it's pretty cool.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
I'm going to put the last question back on you. How has your why changed, or has your why changed?
Mm.
Because what I'm hearing is a lot of the same threads coming through, but I did want to see, did it change over time?
Anyone that gets into something where they were asked to do something, that doesn't last because you inevitably understand that the job of a trainer, although it seems like an honor at the front end, it becomes work eventually. Like no matter how much we love it, there's a work and there's barriers and there's complications, and you cannot live off of the interest in somebody else's delight in you. It won't last. And so to be able to shift that into the idea of seeing the impact and being able to understand that in the midst of the impact, I also find joy in this.
Mhm.
That's, I think, where that transition happened. And so I think that's a huge part. So, just for anyone listening, if you are in a place where you're having a rough week, like this is why we want to tell these stories to ourselves, is to remind ourselves of those connections. Because I have bad weeks, I have bad classes every once in a while where it just falls flat or doesn't work, or I'm sick, or what worked last time just isn't working this time. But if we remember the why and we remember the connections and those people and the trust that we have in the process, I think it's something really beautiful that happens.
Yes,
And it's magic.
it is. Remembering our worth is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's ultimately what that boils down to. That's awesome.
Yeah. What takeaways would you have for anyone listening today where they can maybe put some of these things into practice that we've just been talking about?
As you mentioned earlier, you're welcome to share comments with us. But as you do, thinking about your why are you in the profession that you're in? What was that initial why? Did you stick with it? Has that why changed over the course of your career? And then thinking about what impact have you had? Really identifying that in a succinct way, I think, again, reminds us of our value, reminds us of our worth, and keeps us motivated and engaged to keep going, especially on those hard days, like you mentioned, because we all have them. And sometimes we get a lot of positive feedback from our students, from our peers, from those we're working with and consulting with, but sometimes we don't. And in those times, grounding ourselves, anchoring us in our why is in truth the way to keep putting one foot in front of the other, because you never know what unexpected possibilities will continue to come as we maintain that confidence in building those trusting relationships over time. So when we know our why, we
Mm,
can find courage, and that courage helps us to take risks that are needed to get ahead, to stay motivated when our chips are down, and to move our lives onto an entirely new, more challenging, and more rewarding trajectory. So I thank you for tuning in, and we'd love to hear your story in the comments below and about your why and how this resonated with you.